I'm going to dive right into my story, which I'm starting 15 years ago, which is when I first came out to my friends and family at the age of 21. And at the time, I thought of myself as a bit of a late bloomer. I'd spent my teenage years mostly dating boys, and I'd had some flings with girls, but I never really thought that a real life long-term relationship with a woman was an actual possibility. And I think it's largely because there just weren't really that many role models around at that time. Thankfully, a lot's changed in those 15 years. You know, back then there weren't lesbians on Corrie and stuff like that. And I think that's also one of the reasons that my family found it quite difficult to accept my sexuality as well when I came out. I grew up in a small village in Yorkshire, and I only really knew one other gay person who was our family hairdresser, literally the only gay in the village, and he's still a really good friend of mine. And back then when I came out, quite a common response was, "But don't you want to have a family?" And again, there just weren't really any queer families out, in the public eye for people to refer to. And luckily for me at the time, it wasn't really top of mind. It just was not a priority for me at that point in my life. I'd been at an all girls school, and there was a lot of emphasis on not getting pregnant. So I think for me in my head, I just thought it must be pretty easy to get pregnant. And I don't think I really thought that being with a woman would change that much. Obviously, I was really naive and pretty uninformed in that area. And quite honestly, I'm quite pleased about that, because I think if I'd known how difficult it could be to get pregnant, I probably would have spent my 20s worrying about it. But that isn't what I was doing. In fact, I spent my 20s just in a joyous frenzy of my newfound lesbianism. And I spent a lot of time in East London's gay clubs, really kind of finding my people, surrounding myself with the people who were like-minded, celebrated me for who I was. And I'd call them my first queer family. By the time I met Danielle, I'd spent a lot of time getting comfortable with who I was and with my queer identity. When I met Danielle, in typical lesbian fashion, we decided we wanted to spend the rest of our lives together. And we got married in 2014, just a few months after gay marriage was legalised in the UK. And for us, that choice to get married was really political. You know, we both felt like it was important for us to take our place, to take that right, and also to honour our queer ancestors who'd fought for that right for us. And by the time we got married, you know, I'd been on a real journey with my family, who were amazing, and they had really come around to the idea of having a lesbian daughter and second daughter, as they call Danielle. Danielle and I both knew that we wanted to have kids. And the first step in that journey was just trying to figure out how the hell we were going to make it happen. Could we get help from the NHS? How much was it going to cost? Where were we going to get some sperm? Should we ask a friend? Should we find a donor? There was a lot to figure out, and it really wasn't very easy to find the answers. We went to this event called the Alternative Parenting Show. And at that event, it was like a big road show, and we got to meet people from fertility clinics, sperm banks. We even went to a lecture that went through our legal rights. And for us, because we'd been allowed to get married, if we had a child, we would both automatically be parents, rather than one of us having to adopt the child. Just another bureaucratic hurdle to overcome for equality. We also found out at that event that NHS funding was available for lesbians, and most boroughs would offer one round of IVF, but to access it, you needed to prove your fertility struggles with between 3 and 6 rounds of failed IUI, which you would have to do privately. And at about £3,000 a try, that's just simply not attainable for a lot of people. So we started saving up. And whilst I will always be eternally grateful to the fertility clinic that did eventually get us pregnant, we were both painfully aware that they were a business and their primary objective was to make money. We started out actually trying to get Danielle pregnant, which isn't something we talk about that often. And after a few months of trying and it not working, we went to see an NHS doctor, and she compared our fertility results side by side. And she said, in her opinion, we were probably wasting our time trying to get Danielle pregnant. And she was really quite appalled that the fertility clinic had taken our money quite a lot of our money as well by that point. And that was obviously a really difficult time for both of us, particularly for Danielle. And it was definitely made worse by this feeling that we'd been exploited. Anyway, despite all of that, we did manage to get pregnant. It was over 3 years after we'd decided we wanted to have kids, and I got pregnant with our first son, Blaze, and it was the best feeling ever. And we both stayed up all night researching about our new baby, who the internet told us was the size of an apple seed. And then once we were pregnant, that's when we started to really understand actually how difficult it was going to be to find our space within these systems that we suddenly wanted to navigate. One of the first gifts that we received was a baby diary, and it was covered in rainbows. And when we opened it up, it was all about mum and dad. And that's what we found. Everything for expectant parents assumes that there are two parents, one mum and one dad. We even did a hypnobirthing course. Hypnobirthing is a pretty hippy dippy practice, and you'd really expect the teachers to be like down with the gays. But our hypnobirthing teacher kept referring to Danielle as one of the dads. And it was so awkward that in the end we had to say something to her about it. And that's our experience as two femme presenting cis women. You know, I saw even less space for single parents or for non-binary and trans people. Despite that weird experience with the hypnobirthing, it did work, and we managed to have an amazing, amazing birth. And we gave birth to Blaze. I gave birth to Blaze in February 2019. And then almost exactly 1 year later, I got pregnant with Wolfie, our second baby. And this time around, it worked straight away, first time. And it was a real blessing because it was right before the first lockdown. And in the lockdown, all of the UK fertility clinics had to close. And it meant that a lot of people's fertility journeys were cruelly interrupted. And actually, they estimated about 10,000 pregnancies were either delayed or just didn't happen. And a lot of those will have been queer families who needed the fertility support. So we were really, really blessed to have fallen pregnant when we did. And in the pandemic, because Danielle was being a real life hero and working on the front line of COVID care for the NHS, we decided that me and Blaze should move back up north to my parents' house in the small village in Yorkshire. And, it was a hard decision because it meant we were away. We ended up being away from Danielle for over 3 months, which we never anticipated at the time. And it was really difficult to be apart, especially for her and Blaze, because they'd never actually spent a night apart until then. But it was also really amazing to have that time with my mum and dad, who really helped me with caring for Blaze. And it was amazing for him to really form a strong bond with them. And it was also really amazing for me to have the opportunity to show them what a great mum I am. You know, given that I haven't lived with them since I was a pretty confused and really probably quite annoying and difficult teenager, that felt really important to me. And that's something I'm really grateful for. Once we'd actually got kids, those heteronormative systems that we'd had to navigate during pregnancy just became even more prominent. You know, I would find myself having to come out sometimes on a daily basis if I took one of the kids to the doctors, to the GP, when we started looking around nurseries. You know, by this point in my life, I'm out and proud. But once I'd got a child, it just felt like a different kettle of fish. It felt like a much bigger responsibility. If a taxi driver asks, are Danielle and I sisters? Or someone in a shop asks, which one's the mum? Part of me just wants to immediately come out in order to educate. But you've got to make a snap decision in that moment. And a lot of the time, I don't. I found myself self-censoring. And that's because I've got to think about the safety of my family. You don't know what somebody's opinions are. And there's a lot of emotional labor involved in that. And also in convincing people that you're doing a good job as parents, because I really feel like queer parents can come under much greater scrutiny. And convincing people that you're doing a good job of parenting when you've got two screeching kids in tow can be a real nightmare. But anyway, we've got our two beautiful boys, who you might be able to hear. Actually, they're in the bath. I can hear them. And I will never stop being grateful for those two boys. And I'm also, just so grateful that I get to raise them with Danielle. Raising them together is a total joy. To some extent, we get to invent our own parenting dynamic. I see a lot of my friends who are in heterosexual couples struggling with those binary gender roles that are just hardwired into their relationships, even the most progressive relationships. And I feel really grateful that we just don't have to fight those fights as two women. We split our parenting responsibilities equally. Our roles are pretty much interchangeable. And the way that we raise our kids is we try to do it as free from gender constraints as much as possible. Danielle, who is a retired boxer as well as working for the NHS, is teaching both kids to box. They've both, even though Wolf is only 4 months old, he's got his own boxing gloves already. They both have. I've just signed Blaze up for ballet lessons, and they've got loads of amazing role models in their lives. They've got wonderful grandparents, brilliant aunts and uncles, and they've got a whole host of amazing godparents. That queer family that I spent my 20s building now really helped to raise and nurture our kids. And actually, within our community, we were amongst the first to have kids, and people were really excited. We received so many gifts and well wishes. It was really, it felt amazing. We felt very supported. But I've also come across quite a lot of negative attitudes in the queer community. This attitude that my decision to be in a long-term monogamous relationship with kids is somehow selling out, heteronormative assimilation. People ask, how can a teetotal SUV driving mum of 2 who lives in a 3-bed semi in the suburbs be flying the rainbow flag? But that's just it. I'm flying my rainbow flag in every corner of my life. My very existence and the existence of my family challenges the heteronorms of society, and I'm carving out a place for my family within a system that previously excluded us. Every time I push the buggy or change a nappy, I'm sticking it to the patriarchy. Being a queer mum doesn't mean that somehow I'm living a straight experience. It's quite the opposite. We're reinventing parenting. We're doing it equally, and the only raw material that we have to work with is love. There's not a day goes by when I'm not grateful for my kids, but I'm also really aware of the privileges I have that helped me to get to this position. Married with kids isn't for everybody, but for those of us who do want to raise children, it's really important that we continue to fight against the financial, cultural, and institutional barriers that have excluded LGBTQ plus people from having families and oppressed us for all of time. The world needs more queer parents. Danielle and I always march at Pride, and the last time we marched, it was the last time it was an IRL Pride parade, and we took Blaze along with us. He was a few months old, and we were admittedly more nervous about turning up to Pride with a child in tow. But it was an amazing experience. I was breastfeeding Blaze while we were marching along to the music coming from the pink truck that was right in front of us. And when we turned around the corner to go into Trafalgar Square, someone announced on the tannoys, lesbian mums, and the crowd just really cheered. And I was so overwhelmed by emotion because it really felt like an acknowledgement of what we'd been through to become parents, and what the challenges that we're facing on a daily basis, and we will probably always face as a queer family. I spent my 20s at protests and marches, and to me, queering motherhood isn't selling out or settling down. It's a radical political act at the very heart of those systems that have oppressed us for so long. Raising my children as compassionate, free, and loving humans is part of the queer resistance, and it's the most rewarding activism that I've ever been involved in.